Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Manulife Business Success Series webinar. Immigrants Work Initiative comes to Waterloo Region. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you'll join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is a safe and welcoming space for all. The Chamber knows there is more that we can do, and we are committed to listening, learning, and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our partners and our sponsors. So a special thank you to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and this month's presenting sponsor, Learners LLP. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick points. Please ensure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have any questions that come up throughout the session, you can type them into the question box in your control panel at any time. If it's tech related, a rep of our team will get back to you in just a minute. And if there are questions for today's sponsor, I'll gather those throughout the session, and our speaker will do their best to answer as many questions as possible. All attendees will receive a recording of today's presentation, and it will also be made available through the Greater KW Chamber website. I'd like to now invite Graham Bennett, partner with Learners LLP, to introduce today's speaker. Graham.
Thanks, Ian. Learners LLP is proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series. Learners is a full-service law firm with over 130 lawyers, and its newest office is here in Kitchener, right next to the Chamber of Commerce. I have the privilege of introducing today's speaker, Devin Franklin. Devin has taken an innovative approach to the pervasive challenge of under and unemployment of immigrants in Canada by focusing on developing demand-driven initiatives to effectively create and facilitate pathways to commensurate employment. In her current role at World Education Services, Devin effectively builds partnerships to bring a unique employer-informed focus to program development, to mobilize stakeholder convenings for collective action, and capture best practices to further reach and impact. Previously, Devin was the project manager of Hire Immigrants, a program at the Global Diversity Exchange, or GDX, a think and do tank based at Ryerson University. Hire Immigrants is an online platform for employers to find and share good practices on immigrant employment and a network hub for increased awareness of the valuable skills and talent immigrants bring to local and global businesses. Through this work, Devin has the opportunity to share key learnings with international audiences virtually and has facilitated in-person workshops in Berlin, Sydney, and Stockholm. Through collaborative leadership, Devin aims to build solutions that will drive systemic change for immigrants in Canada and beyond. Devin holds an Honours Bachelor of Arts from the University of Toronto and a Master of Arts in Immigration and Settlement Studies from Ryerson University. Please join us in welcoming Devin.
Well, thank you, Graham, and look forward to this chat. And as a graduate of the University of Toronto, I'm especially pleased to have Devin join us today. I'm sure you were far more academically successful than I was, but it's great to have you with us. And maybe we've gotten to know each other through the work of the Immigration Partnership and the collaboration that we're working on. And I've got a series of questions. We'll do this as a sort of a fireside chat. I think maybe right off the top, for those listening and those that will watch this recording in the coming hours later today or in the coming days, Let's start with why this is important to small business. Like, why is understanding how we interact with immigrants, refugees, newcomers into our community, why is that important to small business? I think that's impressive. I think for me as a business leader, it's one of the most important things we can do is explain why that is a critical component for business themselves. So if you don't mind, let's start there, and then we'll dig into the specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I want to say thank you to the Chamber for having me today on this fireside chat, and Learners LLP and Manulife as the key sponsors in the Immigration Partnership, who's an anchor partner in this work that we're leading in the Waterloo region. Absolutely, today's topic is around immigration, and I just want to set the tone of the conversation to say that I'm really humbled to be here, but also recognize that talent generally is not top of mind for every business right now. I'm very cognizant of the incredible challenges the last 12, 18 months have been for businesses, both locally and nationally, and also recognize that the most recent restrictions have just been incredibly challenging for Ontario businesses. And so I want to set the tone from there. I don't want to come across tone deaf, and very much recognize that this is a first of what I'm hoping are many conversations, and really it's about meeting businesses with where they're at, and helping them to prepare for future workforce resilience. And that future is going to look different depending on what size your business is at, what industry you're in, how you were impacted by the pandemic. So I just want to set the tone that, again, this conversation is going to meet people at different places depending on how their business has been impacted. We'll get into this fireside chat into a number of national as well as regional statistics I have related to, again, just population growth generally, but from small businesses for talent acquisition. The way to grow from a small business to a mid-sized business, it really is through that talent acquisition and fostering that talent pipeline. And so when I talk about immigrant talent, I'm not speaking to just the big businesses who are looking to hire 50 people in the next year. A small business that is looking to hire one additional staff person in the next 18 to 24 months, that's a business that we want to engage, because your needs to tap into immigrant talent are very different than a large business's needs that has very robust HR practices, has an HR team, has a diversity and inclusion team that is able to really dig into the challenges and the opportunities of immigrant talent. And small businesses don't have those luxuries, don't have those processes, often don't have capacity, and are often doing multiple roles. You're both the leader of the company as well as the executor, as well as payroll and recruitment. And so really today's conversation is about setting the context of the need for why we can't sleep on this. We can't think we're going to be in a pandemic forever, or that the realities of our industries are going to be like this forever. But instead, how do we start having the conversations about what the barriers were pre-pandemic, what we know the changes that the pandemic have made that are going to change what our workforce looks like and what our workplaces look like, and how do we co-design solutions that actually you as a business are excited to engage with, and that actually solve the problem that you're facing. I think the immigration sector, and I've worked in the sector for almost 10 years now, we are really great at pointing out what the challenges are, or what we think are the challenges, and developing solutions. But as my bio said, what I think most excites me about the work that I'm doing is it really is about designing solutions in partnership with community leaders, in partnership with local actors like the Chamber, and really in partnership with businesses through those local actors, to make sure that we're not getting so far down the road of, look, we've got this perfectly packaged solution for you, and a business say, this isn't really my issue, or this was my issue 5 years ago when you interviewed me, and now it's very different because we're in a different workforce. And I think, the last year especially has shown the pace of change has been incredibly accelerated. This idea of the future of work, which was a fancy buzzword 18 months ago, we're now living it. We are now seeing and feeling digital transformation is top of mind. How do we, work safely in the midst of a pandemic? How do we work remotely and keep people engaged? Businesses have and then business continuity and just keeping up with business with all of the uncertainty. We recognize that small businesses especially are being hammered in this pandemic with challenges on all fronts. And so this conversation is really about giving a bit of helpful context of, again, why this matters, who WES is, how are we working with the Chamber and other partners in the region, to really open up the discussion of making sure that we are driving towards solutions that your members, that your small business members are excited to engage with, and that don't miss the mark.
So, and I guess the context piece for many, especially small and medium-sized business, which is the bulk of business, that's who the marketplace is, where talent is needed to, whether it's to grow your small business and add a few folks to it. But I think the context piece for our discussion today is, for a small business, the best talent available is the person that they want, regardless of where they come from. So one of the areas where I think and why it's so important for us to communicate this to folks watching today, to Chamber members, the business broadly, is expanding that pool of talent, which would include immigrants and refugees and newcomers to our country, is one that you cannot afford not to be looking for. And so part of what we're trying to do through the Immigration Partnership, our work with World Education Services, to make sure that we're getting that information out so you can get the best person for your business to grow your business and be more successful. So with that as sort of a context, and I guess the context piece, and we can argue around whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, in the very short period of time, all net new employment in the country is going to come from newcomers to our country. So it's something we need to get our arms around. So let's start with just an overview. Tell us about World Education Services. Give us an overview of what it is and how it's trying to work with business directly or organizations like ourselves or the Immigration Partnership. Tell us about World Education Services.
Yeah, and I'll build off of one of the remarks you just made around finding the best talent, and that really is the goal. And you know, I'm going to talk a lot about immigrant talent through this conversation, but it really is about empowering businesses to be able to make that informed decision when they're looking side by side at two resumes. It's not thinking, I need to hire an immigrant or a refugee above all else. That's not the message I'm trying to deliver here. It's about empowering businesses to make an informed decision about who is the right talent for the need that you're looking to fill. And do you have the both the knowledge and the capacity to be able to understand international credentials and expertise and experience, to be able to onboard staff that may be different than staff that you've onboarded in the past, that don't have that shared cultural knowledge or, again, Canadian experience. But absolutely echo you, Ian, that it's not about one over everyone else. It's really about giving employers and businesses the tools to be able to make that assessment and make that informed decision. And that's really one of the primary functions that World Education Services plays in the sector, both in the United States and Canada. So World Education Services, for those that don't know, we've been around for a while. We were founded in 1974 in New York City because our founder was faced with a challenge that many immigrants face. She received her education internationally at an international, well-renowned international institution, came back to New York City, and it was unrecognizable. She couldn't, continue her studies in New York because they wouldn't recognize her previous degrees, and employment was challenging because they really didn't know how to make an apples-to-apples comparison from her previous education. And that really was, from her own lived experience, what inspired her to start this company with a really simple goal in mind. How do we develop a model for evaluating international education credentials for US institutions? And since it's being founded in 1974, it's grown immensely. We opened our Toronto office in 2000. In 2013, we were designated by Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada as one of 5 credential evaluators in Canada to be used for ECAs. And ECAs is the evaluation that's required for any international immigrant that is looking to come to Canada through our economic stream. And some of you may be familiar with the point system. So in order for you to know how many points you have in the point system, you need to get a credential evaluation to see, how do your international credentials measure up to Canadian credentials. To give you a sense of the scale or the volume that WES does, we evaluate about 80% of all immigrant applicant credentials for those that are interested in coming to Canada. And to put a real figure to that, in 2020 alone, which again, our business is also greatly impacted by the pandemic with the border closed, but we still evaluated just under 500,000 immigrant credentials. And so in the sector and amongst, the other 4 credential evaluators, over 45 years now, WES really has set the standard of excellence in the international credential field. And setting the standard for us is really about, the proof being in the numbers. Our evaluation process is really backed by a robust process, historical knowledge, and a research team that's really dedicated to providing accurate credential evaluations. And our database that we've kind of baked from the beginning really speaks for itself. We have over 220 countries and jurisdictions. Within that, there are 48,000 educational institutions, 22,000 credentials and equivalencies, and 4,300 grading scales within our database that we can cross-compare and provide evaluations for. And the vision is pretty simple. We want everyone to be able to put their education, skills, and experience to work anywhere in the world. And that really starts with being able to demonstrate the equivalencies of your education.
Now, you talked about, it's World Education Services is a social enterprise, so it is a business. But explain what that means. I mean, we hear that sometimes. What does that practically mean for the work that you do, and how do you work with, we're a not-for-profit, but we represent business. I mean, tell us how you, that social enterprise, what does that mean in terms of what you do and who you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. Social enterprise is a fairly new business model, relatively new anyway in Canada. So I get this question a lot, especially for those who know the sector really well. When I say I work at World Education Services, they immediately start asking me questions about the credential evaluation process. And I always would say I can speak about it conceptually, but I'm not in the production team working with those documents. How I really like to think about a social enterprise is really kind of as a Venn diagram. You've got the enterprise, the traditional revenue generating side of the company. You've got non-for-profit that's really socially driven, and a social enterprise is really where it meets in the middle. So for WES, our credential evaluation service is a 4-fee service. So applicants pay a nominal fee to have their credential evaluated. But after our operating costs are covered, all surplus revenue gets reinvested into the community we serve through our social impact arm, which is called the Global Talent Bridge team, which is the team that I'm a part of. So that's really where I fit into this work. And so the goal of the social impact side of the business is really to support local and national partners, including academic institutions, professional licensing bodies, employers and employer serving organizations, and community organizations to help immigrants and refugees use their skills and leverage their training to achieve their professional goals. Now, that's a very long-winded explanation. So let me give you just a couple of tangible examples. And I know we're going to talk further about the work that we're doing in Waterloo region that really complements, again, the social enterprise model. But the Global Talent Bridge team a few years ago launched a pre-arrival referral program where we work with community agencies that already provide pre-arrival services to successful immigrant applicants that are still abroad, but they're planning to come to Canada. So they provide them with preparation materials of how to prepare for their, their immigration journey to Canada. And WES recognized, we're really a first touch point for immigrants when they're interested in coming. If they're just exploring to come to Canada, they really come to us first to get started on that credential evaluation process. And so we recognized we were uniquely positioned to be able to reach immigrants early in their stage, to be able to offer them these pre-arrival services. But we knew that there are already a number of organizations in Canada that are funded to do this. And so rather than duplicating the effort, rather than competing, it was more through the Global Talent Bridge team partnering and supporting these agencies to make sure that we're referring clients where appropriate and applicable to these services. And more recently, even within the pandemic, we've all seen our healthcare system get ravaged by the pandemic, and specifically our long-term care homes were hit incredibly hard. But we also know from our database that we have a huge number of internationally educated healthcare professionals here in Canada. And so leveraging both our industry know-how and understanding of the international talent that's within Canada, and recognizing our role to be able to inject much needed capacity into a sector that's struggling and grappling with just keeping the sector going. We have a dedicated team that's mobilizing stakeholders around developing a program that would support kind of more straightforward, direct career pathways for internationally educated healthcare professionals into the healthcare sector that's greatly in need. So really, you know, for us, and especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, we really looked at our priorities on our Global Talent Bridge team for our social impact work. And we've really broken it down kind of into 3 key strategies. One, which is really related to this work that we're going to be doing with the Chamber and the Immigration Partnership, is building inclusive recruitment and hiring strategies that incorporate immigrant talent. So we know even before the pandemic, immigrants were underemployed at greater rates than Canadian-born. We know that that's only been exacerbated within the pandemic. And so how do we start building solutions to get ahead of this so that inequity doesn't continue to widen? We also know that a lot of organizations, chambers, you know, funding, everybody is strapped for cash and capacity. And so how do we use our own capacity and our own sponsorship dollars to really test new strategies and new tools, to really put people power and dollars behind testing new innovations to be able to go to market faster and help those that we're trying to serve quicker. And then also just supporting movements more generally to ensure that no one gets left behind in this pandemic. And as Graham touched on in my intro, you know, really my portfolio on the Global Talent Bridge team is really laser focused on that demand side of the economy. And so really thinking about how do we support community organizations like the Immigration Partnership, business-facing organizations like the KW Chamber, to really be able to mobilize employers and really get that employer-informed perspective when we're developing solutions that ultimately they have to be keen to engage with and that need to speak to their business acumen, that need to speak to their needs. And again, my role has really does emphasize strong partnerships with local stakeholders, because Wes is not interested in doing one-to-one engagement with employers. We know that there are already actors like the KW Chamber that do that well, know the community well, know their business members well. And so it's really working in partnership to make sure that we're delivering solutions for those members.
So I mean, for us, it's one of the tools that we can say when we're saying consider immigrant or refugee talent, that we're working with a group like yours to make sure that we have put the processes in place so that they know that yes, you can do it, use Indeed, and you can use the traditional methods, but here are some of the other opportunities or tools in your toolkit to make sure, because ultimately this is about getting the widest, broadest array of people that have the potential talent to be your next employee, and making sure you're not inadvertently, by omission or commission, leaving out a significant chunk of the potential talent, which in this case is immigrants and refugees. I mean, and that's the relationship that anyone watching here would say the Immigration Partnership and the Chamber are working with you to make sure we've got those tools in place in our community to make sure that an individual business can take advantage of it. Is that a fair way to kind of piece that together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, the benefit of being a social enterprise is that we are not tied to funding from a particular talent sourcing. You know, Indeed isn't giving me funding that I now need to go to the KW Chamber and say, please promote this, and you know, I'll get a kickback for this. You know, being a social enterprise means we are self-funded, which means we can really test solutions and really make sure that we're identifying solutions that we think will work, and then bring them to partners like the KW Chamber and the Immigration Partnership and say, let's put this in front of some employer partners and get some validated feedback. Is this something that would work? And like you said, it's not saying only use this or only use that. It's about saying here is all the things that you can use. These are the things we've tested that we see real results, or here's specific things that speak to your industry. Because we know that that's a big challenge as well. I think oftentimes, again, for whether lack of funding, lack of time, lack of capacity, we really love a one-size-fits-all model. Let's build something and give it to all businesses and assume that all businesses will be able to use it. Everyone on this call, anybody who tunes in later, knows that that's not the case. It's very rarely the case. Businesses are so uniquely structured, unique based on industry. We've seen that in the pandemic. Some businesses really are still struggling to find talent and have been thriving over the pandemic. Many more businesses have been struggling and are trying to adapt on all fronts. And so this idea of a one-size-fits-all approach hasn't worked in the past. And I think that's really what we're trying to address here by working with local community partners to say, what's going to work in Waterloo? What's going to work for your businesses and the industries within your region, and let's develop solutions that your businesses are going to want to use, and maybe they'll work in the next community over. Maybe they'll work for some Toronto businesses, maybe they'll work for some Durham businesses, but let's really hone in to what the businesses in your local region need. And again, add that added support and capacity to be able to test solutions and then bring them back to you to be able to have them mobilized.
Okay, so we're still very much in the pandemic. I mean, obviously the latest lockdown illustrates that more graphically than I can. I think it's fair to say there are some businesses doing well if you're home based, etc., and have talent needs of their own because they're doing well. But I think it's more likely that there's probably more businesses who are not doing well, who haven't felt the recovery yet, and it's certainly sporadic or different in different regions of the country, different provinces, and different sectors will feel it in a different way when the recovery comes. If you take the macro numbers, unemployment, which really spiked about a year ago when it was total lockdowns and it was up over 9.5%, 10% nationally, has come down, but it's still an uneven recovery, and in some ways many are still feeling more crisis than recovery, and so with that economic uncertainty, unemployment not as low as it was pre-pandemic, why does immigration still matter, and why does doing work now set us up for the recovery that will come? The private sector will, when we get through this and vaccinations happen and we get more understanding of how to manage COVID, because it's not going away, but we'll be able to manage it. How does this help set us up for that, what we hope is a really robust, extended period of time of economic growth, which will lead to job creation and need for employers to hire? Tell us how that fits together in this moment when it doesn't feel like the recovery's here for us.
Yeah, I feel that really acutely. It is very challenging since the 1st of April, especially. It's been very challenging to feel optimistic. New restrictions, very slow, abysmal rate of vaccination, and businesses being, themselves in the traumatic open, close, back and forth. I appreciate that this feels like, again, not top of mind, not a challenge that you're feeling right in this moment. But I do want to pick up on the more optimistic connotation of your comment, Ian, which is that we are going to get to recovery. This is not a permanent state. This is a current state. And our future state is going to look very similar to what it looked like in early 2020. And so I want to share a little bit of the demographic reality that Canada is facing, pandemic or not. It has not changed. The demographic challenges that Canada's really staring down. And if we don't start doing the prep now, and that's why I said that this is not going to be the silver bullet conversation. This is the first of many. But if we don't start having these discussions and start building, actually building back better, and I know we've heard a lot about this, and again, it's hard to feel motivated to start building when you're still, haven't even felt the glimmer of recovery. But you need a toolbox to start building. And so how do we start, really empowering you with those tools to actually get to that build back better? If we have stalled progress on the inclusion of immigrant talent, it will make the road ahead more challenging. And so, why we're trying to keep this sentiment going is really so we don't sleep on this and then be in crisis a year from now, when we have the same labor shortages that we were faced with in really early 2020. We know that by 2030, the share of Canadians over the age of 65 is expected to nearly double, with more than 5 million Canadians in retirement. That, combined with the country's low fertility rate, which has decreased over the pandemic, which I was a little bit surprised about. I thought everyone being at home, it might have impacted our fertility rate, but in fact, I think people are sick of being stuck at home with their partners and their spouses. So with this research, the research is in, and you flagged it, Ian, up top. Immigration is expected to account for 100% of Canada's labor force growth, period. New immigrant targets reflect this reality. Our government has come out with aggressive targets over the next 3 years, which it's projected to bring in over 1 million immigrants over the next 3 years. Of those immigrants, 50% of them are going to be highly educated, so they're going to have a bachelor's degree or higher. So again, for West, the importance of making sure that employers know how to understand those international credentials is immense. And of the 1 million immigrants that are expected to come in over the next 3 years, 60% of them are coming through the economic stream. So like I said, they're going to be highly skilled. They're meant to, again, match the labor market needs of Canada, but also anticipate what those labor market needs are going to look like, so we have the right talent in Canada to be able to meet those labor market needs. Now, I get that, you know, Ian, you said these are macro numbers, these are national figures. People on this call are like, yeah, well, like, what does that mean for Waterloo region? And the story is really similar. In the Waterloo region, 20% are over the age of 55, and it's as high as 25 to 30% in specific industries like fabricated metal production manufacturing, transportation and warehousing, accounting, scientific consulting. Those figures are all close to 30% of the workforce right now in the Waterloo region are over the age of 55. Now, the region is one of the top urban innovation zones in North America. You know, the concentration of university students, IT firms, scientific research and development activities really does make the region attractive and a draw to be able to attract new talent. And the stats really do show this. From 2010 to 2019, the population in the region grew by 15%. That is the fastest growth rates in urban centers across Canada. You know, that's immense. But despite these figures, the number of people aging out of the workforce is outpacing the number of people coming into the workforce. In the past 5 years, the region has seen a 29% increase in the number of people over the age of 55. Whereas in that same period, it's only seen a 1% increase of people coming into the workforce under the age of 55. Those are just, you know, really stark contrast in numbers, how many people are exiting and how many people are coming into the workforce. Those labor market challenges for the region just prior to the pandemic were immense. You know, in a news release by the Ontario government in January 2020, it stated that on any given day, there are more than 18,000 vacant jobs in the Kitchener, Waterloo, and Barrie region. That's immense. And again, I know we're not feeling that in this moment, but recovery is coming, and the region is a thriving hub that is going to need that talent source, is going to need to nurture that talent pipeline. You know, we saw in 2018 in the region, construction firms, healthcare, manufacturing, all reported close to 69% of them were facing skilled labor shortages. 69%. Those realities have not shifted in the pandemic. It may have been stalled, it may be stalled right now, but we are going to recover. Our economy and the pressure to really rebound strong is going to be there. And then having that talent is going to be significant. And again, the region has an impressive ability to attract companies and students and people. And that effort to attract, it needs to be ramped up, and the mechanisms to retain that talent. So not just to attract students, but how do we keep them here? International students, newcomers, how do we keep them here to make sure that we have the critical numbers to grow strategically in those regions, in those industries in the region, and again, so local businesses thrive. Like I've said before, immigrants are not the, you know, the catch-all solution. I'm not saying it's the only recommendation. You know, and I'll share with Ian after this a great report out of IRCC that talks about a number of different, you know, ways to look at economic development and growing, you know, talent in the region. Immigrants is one of those pillars. It's one of those recommendations to boost the talent pipeline. But incorporating immigrant attraction and supporting businesses to effectively know how to recruit, how to retain immigrant talent, it's a significant component to future workforce resilience and economic growth.
So we'll get that report. We'll probably post it along with this link, so people in this discussion will be able to have that accurate. Now, I was promised there was no math involved in this discussion we were having here, because I'm not good with math, but what I can say is even I can understand when you give some of those numbers, the reality of that the workforce, businesses, entrepreneurs are going to face with every passing day, which speaks to your last point. Immigrants have got to be one of those quivers or arrows in your quiver. It's got to be one of the tools in the toolbox. And I think it gets more pronounced. I mean, we talk about skilled immigrants, but when we look at things like in the trades, the construction trades and others, we just don't have enough people, period, right now. And so where are we going to get that talent from? And there are skilled trades you talk electricians, pipe fitters, plumbers, go up and down the CAD, you go down all the list of what is not in just construction, but general trades. There is a need, and immigrants have got to fill all of those jobs, and right across the board. So let's, even before the pandemic. So we're in that pandemic. We've touched on that. Businesses and many of our members have raised, the challenges are about the barriers to accessing immigrant talent. So even if they want to do it, they feel, and in many cases it's true, there are barriers to getting immigrant talent, whether it's on the certificate or the documentation of their credentials or the credential certification. Getting them in the country, and then there's issues around maybe language and culture and other pieces which all need to be addressed. So they believe, and there probably are barriers to having immigrant talent, and matching the right talent with the right job for the right employer. So how do you support, and I know this is, maybe explain this part. What are you doing now to support businesses so when they start to need that talent, that there's that pool there? So, and I think that's part of the work that we're doing with the Immigration Partnership, the Chamber, the Workforce Planning Board, all of the partners that are part of this community discussion. But maybe to kind of pull those pieces together, because you've got a rich history at World Education Services, and that's why we're excited about trying to be a part of a community initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to one of my previous comments, and that when I say that we need to build back better, I'm not just talking about businesses. I'm talking about the immigration sector as well, because we heard this time and time again, leading into the pandemic. 2019 was the tightest job market we had, but still, especially small and medium-sized business, 40% were struggling to find talent. And the barriers are real. The barriers are not kind of pie in the sky, people complaining because they don't have a perfect talent showing up on the door. It's that the talent either isn't here, or they don't know how to recognize the talent when it is, because we don't have standardized processes, again, around competency, how to understand, I see the credentials and maybe I have a bit of an understanding about that, but do I know if they can do the job? And for skilled trades, that's a huge barrier. Being able to know if someone can really come in and do the job is significant. And that becomes even more significant if you're a small business and you don't have time to spend hours upon hours in interview process and simply just don't have the capacity. You need somebody, hired on Friday to start on Monday and hit the ground running. So those barriers are real. Those capacity challenges are immense. And we know, again, before the pandemic, $50 billion in GDP is lost in Canada due to poor recognition of international skills, earning gaps, and also just skilled immigrants being in low-wage jobs because they can't find the jobs, even though our labor market data says the jobs are there. There are vacant jobs, and either immigrants are landing in the wrong cities for their talent to be able to be used, or again, small and medium-sized businesses don't have what they need to be able to recruit and attract them. So when I say build back better, I'm not just pointing the finger at businesses. I'm saying we all need to really look at our systems and really start deconstructing them and thinking differently about how we do this. And that's very easy for me to go to other leaders in the immigration sector, to our EOs, and say, I think we should do X, I think we should do Y. What we really need, and again, why I'm so excited about this partnership with this chamber, is we need businesses to say, I'm not being able to find the right talent, or when I find talent that I think could be right, I have no tools to be able to really assess that they are the right fit. Or I'm really struggled, I know that their, language proficiency test score says that they're really proficient in English, but I'm really struggling to get over the accent, and I'm going to be having them in a customer service role. How do I start overcoming this or starting to work through this? Those are real challenges. Those are real challenges for a business. And I think, previously we were in a very healthy economy. It was very easy for us to either turn a blind eye or not address them. We can't afford to do that. We can't afford to go through this period and come out and be in the exact same position we were in 2019. Businesses were struggling. It was a super tight job market. And again, immigrants and refugees that were highly skilled or not, were just in the wrong positions based on their experience and expertise. And so, I firmly place Wes and the immigration sector kind of writ large in that building back better phase. And so part of the work that we started in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic was really looking back at the 2007-2008 recession and recognizing that immigrants were the first to be let go, last to be called back, and took almost 7 years for them to get back to either similar or comparable jobs post-recession. Again, our economy can't have that kind of stagnation. After the pandemic, once we start getting into that recovery phase, we can't take 7 years to really bounce back. And so we launched a national coalition, which is called the Immigrants Work Initiative. And again, it's really about, how do we do a temperature test nationally on what are the best practices and strategies to be able to really look at the full employment cycle, from kind of that attraction, recruitment, to hiring, to onboarding, to integrating your workplace. What are the best practices that are tried and true, that have been used, that are easy to implement, and that you can actually take that first step? Depending on where your company's at. Again, maybe right now you're not interested in recruiting, but you have a few staff, immigrant or otherwise, racialized staff, women staff, vulnerable staff, part of your team. Those practices, those good HR practices, are good HR practices. Whether you're hiring immigrant talent or otherwise, these are good practices. And starting to look at those practices and looking at your own processes internally and starting to make those changes. And that's coming out in an employer playbook in the next month or so. But as I said before, we're not big fans, and we know it doesn't work, this whole one size fits all. And so we're coming out with this national playbook that is a culmination of these strategies and best practices. But they've been developed over the last 10 years, and we are in a very different labor market. Our businesses are grappling with very different issues. And quite frankly, we really need to validate whether these are best practices anymore in the current reality that we're working with and that businesses are working in. So we're really dubbing this a first iteration. And in order to iterate this, we really need local partners to be able to drive this forward, to really help us understand, is this going to speak to your local context, to the industries, and again, the way recovery has worked in the Waterloo region versus another region, and then really put these solutions to employers and say, this is what we've come up with. Do we need to throw this? Do we need to throw all these out, throw the book out, and start from scratch? Do some of these work, but they need to be tweaked to really be able to be implementable? And then again, maybe over here, there's a whole other issue that you can't even start to look here until this is resolved. And so let's start digging in to what the real challenges are. And again, we hear the same issues about capacity and access. Okay, so let's start thinking about how do we solve for that? And not just how do we solve for that, we build it, but how do we keep employers engaged throughout the process so they can say, no, when I said X, you've done something different here. Go back to the drawing board. I actually need it to look different. So having a validation.
Yeah, I think that's really important, particularly for small business. Having a playbook of things that either have worked in the past or we think or we're hearing might work moving forward is really important to have. I think in this context, and what I like about this is it's kind of plug and play. Not everything's going to work for every community. It's not going to work for every sector within the local economy. It's not going to work for every size of business. So I think that's what's important but having this, I would say, not quite portal, but having the toolkit where through organizations like ourselves, the Immigration Partnership at the local level, saying, here's what we've pulled together. 2 or 3 of these 10 or 12 things might work for you, but that's what you want to pull out, the 2 or 3 that are going to work for, in particular, that small and medium-sized business who does not have the time to go and find it all out themselves and make a choice. That we're kind of acting, and Wes and again, the Immigration Partnership and others are trying to pull this together so they can choose that. So maybe one of the things that it becomes a real problem, and time is probably the biggest challenge for any small business in terms of meeting folks, understanding initiative, and so everyone is consistently asked to attend events, complete surveys, because we want to give you help, but you need to invest time. And that's probably the most precious commodity for any small or medium, especially small business, is you've hit the nail on the head. They're doing the payroll, they're doing the HR, they're doing the hiring, they're doing the business development, they're doing the finance, and it's all the same person. So, so the burden on people's finite time and very precious time, what makes this, what we're trying to do here with West, what makes this different? And why should a chamber member, as an example, so the dry cleaner or the fabricator, that small business that may have 5 or 10 employees, why should they? Would those folks be encouraged to participate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, the last year, we're all feeling that information fatigue, virtual event fatigue, being inundated, and especially for businesses from, all levels of government, agencies you work with, the ask to complete surveys and attend events, I realize is incredibly hard. What we're really trying to do is, one, recognizing that time is money, to try to do this as concisely and well organized and planned so that we get the most amount of information in the least amount of time. And so, for me, it's really about, this will not be a webinar series to attend where we talk at you, where it's recorded and you can listen back, but instead bringing you in. And like I said, it's about co-designing and hearing from businesses. So myself, we have a group of foundational partners, and if we've got time at the end, I can run through kind of everyone who's participating on this initiative. We want to listen. We really want to put employers in the driver's seat and say, here's, a few themes that we want to talk about as it relates to talent acquisition in the region. And we want to know from you, what are the barriers? What are the challenges? Let's really define the problem space. And this is not to, use your, time for an hour and a half, and then come back to you in a year and a half with a really nice report that tells you all of the challenges and complaints and capacity issues you have. This is about really rapidly taking that information and turning it into an output. And so immediately flipping that national playbook into something that is localized, that has a roll up of localized services, localized places that you can go in the short term. If you are one of those businesses that you're looking to hire one person, a couple people, or in a few months you're going to be, having the playbook really localized for the greater Waterloo region so that you can open that up, see yourself reflected in it, and see your feedback in the session reflected in it. And then the second piece is, I do not anticipate that this playbook is going to be the solution for everything, for everybody, for anybody. And so the idea is being open in this employer workshop to hearing from employers, bring up things out of left field that maybe we're not thinking about, to say, this is actually really my biggest barrier to talent, is I don't know where to find it. That's really what I need. I need, something more simplified to be able to access talent generally in the region. And again, it's not about waiting a year and a half to come back to you with a solution. It's about coming back to you much more frequently to say, okay, based on your feedback, this is what we're thinking to pilot. Does this make sense? Is this something you'd be able to use? And really rapid pulse check-ins, again, through the chamber, through the partners that are already engaged with employers. So that as an employer, you don't feel like you've given up an hour of your time to see a really nice designed report in a year and a half that we've all seen when we've attended events. And it comes out in recommendations that you never know if they're actually going to be done or not. We're looking to be action oriented. We're not looking to sleep on this. And so I guess for members to participate, one, we want to make good use of your time. It's going to be participatory in nature. If you register and you attend, you will be, and your voice will be heard and have an opportunity to contribute. The other piece, though, is I recognize that the time, the date, everybody has competing priorities. It just may not work for you. It just may not be possible. And so there'll be other ways to have your voice heard. Over the summer, I'll be facilitating one-to-one interviews that are a bit more of a deep dive. And so if you're businesses that says, in 2019, I really was struggling and I don't want to be in that same place in 2021, 2022, talk to Ian, let's set up a time that is convenient for you, so that we can make sure that we're capturing your insights and your feedback and your challenges. So we really want to meet you where you're at. So if you want to participate and we set the date and the time and you say, this is right during my lunch rush, or this is just not possible for me to attend, please don't think that that's the only way to attend, please reach out to Ian and communicate that you want to be able to participate, and we will find a way to make sure we capture your insights and your perspective.
Okay, so if most business owners would have my level of patience, so they'll be eager to say, so what's the timeline? What are we talking about? How do we get started? Because if anyone's watching now and is fired up about this, or as we continue to share this, if they get fired up, what's the timeline, and when will this come off the page so that there's practical elements for any business owner and entrepreneur to take advantage of?
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone who's and I hope you are fired up, I hope you're eager, know that you have a community that has really stepped up for you. I've been so impressed working with the Waterloo Region partners. This initiative is being anchored and led by the Immigration Partnership, but it really is collaborative across our foundational partners. The Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber is one of those partners. We have the Cambridge Chamber, the Waterloo Small Business Center, the Workforce Planning Board, the YMCA, Agilic, the KW Multicultural Center, the Economic Development Department out of the region of Waterloo, and 3 business representatives that are right in that foundational partner group to really lend that business acumen and HR expertise. And so over the next 3 months, it really is the planning phase. Like I said, we don't want to have an employer workshop where you show up and it's, again, you don't feel like it's a good use of your time. We're really acutely aware that this needs to be valuable to you. It needs to be set up in a virtual environment that allows for really high touch participation. And so we are kind of barring no punches to really make sure that we have digital tools that will allow for maximum participation and engagement with those that attend. So that's really the planning. We'd be ready to do something in the summer, but I know everyone on this call, you don't want to be stuck inside any more than you have to in the summer months, especially after the most recent appearance of winter today. And so we're really looking to have a fall employer event, employer workshop. Like I said, we're looking to an hour to an hour and a half of bringing employers together and having a really high touch participatory event. And then the target is to have that first output out before the end of the year. And again, even sooner the better. We don't want to run up on the holiday period. But that's really the timeline for the employer workshop. Like I said, we are looking to do one-to-one interviews with employer leaders in the region to really get a focused deep dive of some of the challenges and barriers kind of pre-COVID and during COVID, so that when we're designing that workshop, we've got intelligence from employers in the region. And so I really encourage anyone who's listening to this, anyone who doesn't want to have a repeat of struggling to find talent, or is really just feeling like this is an overwhelming topic, you don't know where to start, I want to talk to you. I want to hear, again, what are those hesitancies you have, or again, capacity challenges, barriers, and those can be scheduled at your convenience over the next 3 months as we're in the planning phases. So those are just a couple of ways of getting involved in the short term, but it's really that fall date that Ian will be communicating with all of you around participating, joining. You'll see familiar faces in the chamber staff to really be able to lend your insights and expertise for us to help solve this wicked challenge.
Well, I would say coming out of when we end this latest lockdown and start to come out and vaccinations ramp up, I think there's going to be a lot of folks that will be wanting to spend whatever time they need to make sure that as they start to emerge and they're bring back staff and try and recover, because the recovery is so essential. I think there will be a big need and for us to communicate that this is an opportunity and a tool for them is going to be really essential. So I think the sooner the better that we get that out to businesses and get them started and engaged in this as one, as you say, when you're looking at your talent needs, that this is one of the things you can no longer ignore as being one of the, the foundational pillars of your own talent strategy in your own business. So listen, we're gonna leave it in just a second. I'll give you I'll give you a wide open softball. What have we forgotten? We've covered a lot of ground today, and certainly be in touch with Nora and Tara and the team at the Immigration Partnership, certainly through us at the Chamber, and as you've mentioned, all kinds of partners around the region. we'll do our part to kind of keep promoting this. What else have we missed, or what else would you like to tell our members and people in the business community and folks watching today?
Yeah, I mean, I think just ending on a positive note that, like I said, the Waterloo region is a leader in the country in terms of attraction, in terms of, economic development and really, leading as an innovation hub across the country. And these challenges that we're staring in the face of, stepping up and really wanting to be a part of building the solutions is part of building a more resilient Waterloo region. And you're not alone in that effort. I'd mentioned that we're really looking at localizing and looking at the local. And so there are 3 pilot cities that are going through the same process with the Waterloo region. One is Moncton, the city of Moncton out in New Brunswick, and the Durham region. That's another region just outside of the GTA in Ontario as well. And so that the ability to also share information and share, again, strategies and experiences, that's really going to enrich the types of solutions that we come out of this engagement. And again, you're not alone in the challenges that we're faced, and that makes us stronger in numbers to be able to move this forward and really move the dial and make sure that we're developing solutions that are action oriented and have that business focus, so that we're all stronger together moving forward. So that'll be the positive note I'll leave it on.
All right, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you, Devin. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. That does bring us to the end of today's session. Once again, I'd like to thank our title sponsor of the series, Manulife. Our platinum sponsor of the series is, of course, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region. This month's presenting sponsor, Learners LLP, and to today's speaker, Devin Franklin of World Education Services. And finally, to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do host a new Business Success Series session every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Join us next week as Mike Braga from BDO joins us and discusses managing creditors 1 year into COVID. Pretty important thing for business. For full details and to register, visit greaterkwchamber.com. Please do share this series with your friends and colleagues. Join us every Wednesday afternoon for the next edition of the Business Success Series, because if it's Wednesday, it is, of course, the Business Success Series. And I want everyone to remember, stay positive, test negative, because we are stronger together. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great afternoon.